don't kill me. I have a lot to live for. I have a wife and kids.
Welcome to Coffinbrood. I am your host, Coffinbrood. Ladies and gentlemen, comment down below and subscribe to my channel if you have not, especially you ladies, and have a chance for me to screenshot your comment and post it on Twitter. Thank you. I am an artist and always have been very in my own world, as it were. I was thinking of a story or a character or a picture I wanted to draw. I'd walk into walls and forget anything, anywhere, and place items in weird places while I was thinking. To give you an extent of this, my first place to look for anything I've lost in the fridge and freezer. I found remotes, cell phones, art equipment, anything really in there. Secondly, I have always had a negative view when it comes to alcohol or anything narcotic. I don't mean to shame any one of you reading this with it, but it was always something I just generally regarded as pointless. However, if you find enjoyment in it, all the better to you. Third, I am a very asexual person. I never desire sex or have any interest in finding a mate, so flirting usually flies over my head. And finally, due to my childhood, I have a mild case of anxiety disorder, which has lately been worse due to this event and escalated by other things. This particular story begins when I graduate from an upper secondary school for visual arts. Upper secondary is a type of high school in Scandinavia. I had decent enough grades, my best being biology and English, and of course art. I immediately looked for work after graduation since I had graduated half a year late because of some health issues, and the entrance exams for universities were already done by the time I graduated, so I had around 1.5 years before even the possibility to apply for a university. I would send hundreds of applications to any place that would take me, and hardly ever even got invited for an interview. This took its toll on me, and I got depressed. I'd hardly leave the house and stopped taking care of myself altogether. I wouldn't shower, put on makeup, brush my teeth, anything. I would avoid mirrors, and I felt as though I was a complete and utter failure, which was not made any better by my parents, who pressured me with, "How many applications did you send today?" Or, "You really need to get a job so you can start saving to move out." This may sound mean, but they didn't mean it in a bad way, since I'd expressed the need to get my own flat for the past few years. Not to mention my relationship with my parents at the time was very strained, since my depression made me very irritable and angry, so I can't really blame them for pushing me to get out of the house. This continued for around half a year, until I finally got a job in a hypermarket around 8 miles away from the place I lived in. Life really picked up from there, and I started to take care of myself once again. The people I worked with were all very nice people. I had no issues with anyone, though they were very normal, so I'd get invited to get-togethers or to have a pint after work, etc. I always made an excuse why I couldn't go, and would play MMOs or something instead at home. This might sound sad, but I enjoyed myself more like that. Fast forward a year of working, and I was accepted into my #1 choice university, and due to this, I cut my work hours to half. So I was only at work for 2 to 3 nights a week. The particular hypermarket chain I worked at had a yearly festival week gimmick to boost sales, and this year we were handed scratch cards to sell during the cash out process. Apparently the chain had a contest within every location, and the winning hypermarket would be given 1,000 e-cash price for employee refreshment purposes. Booze. Our hypermarket decided we'd take everyone out for a night. of drinking in a hotel resort area connected to the shopping mall our workplace was with the money. No surprise there. And since I have grown close friends with many of the other cashiers, I was motivated to win, even if I usually didn't enjoy going out. Everyone in the department was so excited for it. It was kind of infectious. Long story short, we won the competition and we went drinking. Our boss was so pleased with how well we did and how motivated we were. He even opened us a tab in the first bar we went to, so I had quite a bit to drink too. When the first bar closed down, we went to continue into a nearby nightclub. I hardly remember anything else than that. I drank like a sailor and sang karaoke horribly. We stayed until closing time, and I made my way to the train station to catch the last train home. On my way, I was stopped by a man with a thick accent who asked if he could walk me home. I laughed and just said that no worries. I was literally a few steps away and mentioned towards the station. He then apologized and said he thought I lived in the student buildings nearby and went on his way. I thought that was quite an endearing way to ask someone out and thought nothing more of it. Another year passes by, and I'm now living alone in a student block not far away from my parents' home. The area I moved to was very poor, since it consisted only of students, so in a weird way, I actually felt very safe living there. The walls were thin as paper, so everyone would hear if anything happened to me, or if anyone tried to break into my home, etc. Granted, I got an email from the company that founded the cheap student blocks that the bike seller and the address was broken into, but I never kept anything in there, so it didn't really faze me. Sometimes I'd even forgot my keys on the lock in the front door and wake up in the morning to a neighbor ringing my doorbell and handing me the keys with a joking, "Nothing to steal, eh?" There was a very convenient bus that stopped right outside my door that I could take for both school and work, though I needed another bus to get all the way to work. One Saturday, after a 9-hour shift at work, looking and feeling like a total zombie, I was making my way to the bus stop through my underpass late at night when I heard someone call out to me through my earphones. I always stop if I heard someone call out when I was near work, since it usually was a colleague offering a lift or a regular customer wanting to crack a joke, or one of the guys from a GameStop upstairs wanting to talk about Skyrim or something. I was basically friends with nearly every employee in the mall, so someone stopped me late at night in a sketchy parking lot or underpass was very common. I didn't recognize the man, but then again, I handled around 600 customers every day, so I hardly ever did. I was also conditioned to flash a bright smile through years of customer service whenever I met anyone's eyes, even outside of work. I'm sure that once the man spoke very fast in a thick accent about how he was in love with me and how he had been watching me. It was very hard to make sense of anything he was saying. It was a stream of consciousness kind of thing, how he spoke. What I did make out was that he had seen me in a bar, which he named, and ever since then, he had been watching me, and never before found the courage to talk to me before now. I was unsettled by the choice of words, but I chalked it up to him not being a native speaker. I listened to him while I nervously eyed the underpass, feeling glad there were a few people walking through it during this whole spiel. After he quieted down, I just awkwardly said, "Okay, thanks, but I need to go now, or I'll miss my bus," and turned and continued on when he grabbed me and pushed me back towards the wall of the underpass. I was around 30 centimeters taller than him, but he had a lot of mass over me. since most of the sports I had ever done was acrobatics and ballet. And I'd quit even that years ago. I considered punching him or screaming, but I felt it better not to escalate the situation, so I sternly told him to let go and that I needed to get to the station. He pleaded for me to give him a chance and said he wouldn't let me go before I did. I was racking my brain about the safest way to get out of the situation, so I tentatively told him, "What if I save your number and I'll see if I can call you?" I had used this on another persistent suitor before, and it worked just fine. Now I wish I'd never uttered those words. The man's face lit up, and he started to spell out his name. He was somewhere from the Middle East, while I pulled out my phone and hammered his name and number into my phone, sighing in relief. I was almost safely back at home, and suddenly he grabbed my hand and tore my phone from my hand. At this point, I screamed in anger, "What the fuck are you doing? Give it back!" But to my horror, everyone had moved from the underpass, and I was alone with this creeper, and he ignored my struggling and screaming completely and calmly just called his own phone number from it before handing it back to me, as if what he just did was completely normal. I stared at him, terrified and dumbfounded. He then hugged me tight, cupping a feel, and tried to kiss me. I hurriedly blocked his mouth with my hand and forcibly pushed him away. I didn't say anything anymore and just ran out from the underpass, and he didn't try to stop me. When I was safely at home, I blocked his number first and then deleted it, thinking any deity possible that when I moved out and got my new number, my father had insisted on an unlisted one, so he couldn't just find my address out by Google. I asked my manager to not give me the Saturday night shift for a while and explained my problem to her. I also asked if he could be banned from the store or something, but she told me she couldn't do anything before I filed a restraining order. Obviously, I had no idea what the man's name or number was anymore, not to mention getting a restraining order on him based on what I had as evidence was very unlikely. A few weeks went by, and he showed up when I was at work without fail, as if he knew my shift. Even though I had a different shift every week, he'd just stare at me from outside the shop, or buy a single lollipop, or something else cheap multiple times a day, paying with cash, so I had to extend my hand to him, which he always took and held for as long as there was no other customer there. The horrible thing about this was it was not unusual to get a creepy customer every so often. Every now and then you'd get them if you worked as a cashier. Mentally ill or just socially inept, desperate people make mistakes about customer service representatives as genuine interest painfully often, and you hardly paid any more attention to it than the other customers, since nearly always it's a short-term thing and kinda harmless. Basically, this man could have been stalking me for God knows how long, and I just didn't notice. The thought that I only noticed this now that I had that earlier encounter with him was enough for me to lose sleep over and get a reoccurring sleep paralysis nightmare of someone entering my room and breathing heavily in my ear as a result. This went on, and it was now a few days until my 4 weeks of paid and 4 weeks of unpaid summer vacation I had requested and given. The thought of not having to go to work and face the man every day was enough to perk me up, so I threw myself into an extracurricular school project. One day I had stayed at school working on a 2D rig for said project until school was closing and the janitor ushered me out of the classroom. I had a little while before my bus was due to arrive at the stop, so I decided to catch up with some fresh air after working nearly 12 hours on the computer and walked to the nearby station that was at the end of the line. The bus was already waiting, so I rushed in, and after I paid the fee and faced the back of the bus, my stomach turned. There he was, with 3 friends, the guy with the thick accent, my stalker. We were only the passengers. I thought about getting off of the bus, but the next one wouldn't be here for an hour, so against all common sense, I decided to stay on. I sat on the very front of the car, hoping he wouldn't notice me. But as soon as the bus left the station, he moved to sit next to me, and his friends moved to sit behind me, as if he knew this was the line I took usually, and just waited so I couldn't exit the bus. I was ready to puke. I turned my music so loud in my ears, it hurt. I ignored every tap on the shoulder and every grab. I clenched my computer bag on my lap, ready to sacrifice my computer and smack him in the face with it if he tried to do anything else. Then the realization hit me. This line stopped literally on the front door of my building. My name was plastered on the front door of the building. He would know where I lived. I felt as if I could bust into a howling cry any minute now. My thoughts were going a mile a minute, considering everything that could happen to me if I didn't have a way to get out of the situation. I knew there was no longer a stop coming up later, so I decided to try to make my break there. When the stop rolled around, heart pounding, I said, music still breaking my eardrums, "Sorry, I need to get off here," and made my way to the mid doors, all 4 men following me, speaking fast in Hebrew. When the doors opened, I stepped out and walked a while before suddenly turning back and running like I was possessed back into the bus and yelling at the driver, "Drive! Just go! Please! Please! Please!" The driver stared at me blankly, looked at the men who were running towards the bus, and back at my face, twisted into loud sobs, and how I was shaking, and he decided I was serious, closed the doors and sped off. He stopped the bus at a garage a few miles away, asking if he could do anything, call the cops or something. I just kept sobbing and recounted my first encounter to him, when something in my head clicked. The bar. He had specifically named it. It was the nightclub we went to continue our drinking over a year ago when we won the contest. I never before or after had visited that nightclub. He said he saw me there. He had been following me over a year. That night, he was the one who offered to walk me home. That is why he showed up at my work without fail whenever I was working. I sobbed, howled like a damn tortured cat at that, and the driver told me to go lie down in the back and that he'd drive me home. I told him it was the last stop. The driver dropped me off safely home before he continued his round, risking his job for my safety. I can't thank him enough, and I don't even know his name. After this second incident, I called in work sick until my vacation and cut off my hair and dyed it black. I also only spent the vacation biking around my hometown during the day, staying out from the town my work and my school was for the whole 2 months. I occasionally still sometimes have those sleep paralysis nightmares, but I never saw him again. A small part of me thinks it's because he doesn't want me to. One thing is for sure though, I never left my keys in my lock again. So to the man with a thick accent, let's not meet. Before I begin, I will clarify right now that I absolutely never led this kid on. Everyone who knew about it while it was happening will say the same. I am not a flirty person, and I was very careful not to say or do anything to make this boy believe I was into him. So we are traveling back 7 years, all the way back to when I was 14 years old. Makes me feel old as hell. I was at a high school sport event. It was a Friday night game. I can't remember if it was a football or a baseball game. All I know was it was the last day of school before spring break. I wasn't super into school spirit. I was an emo kid and a loner for the most part, but my best friend pressured me into going. I reluctantly agreed, and looking back, I wish I didn't. I have known her since I was like 4, so if anyone could convince my stubborn ass to do something, it's 100% her, laughing my fucking ass off. For the sake of anonymity, we'll call Stalker Boy Zach, and my guy friend Cody. I had met Zach through my friend Cody. I probably spoke to him for 3 minutes, honestly. It was more like an introduction, and I didn't vibe with the guy the way he stared at me, so I went back to my all-girl friends, and we continued the night. After I got home, I received a text from Cody saying Zach thought I was pretty and wanted my phone number, so he gave it to me. I don't really think much about it. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't wanted to talk to him or for him to have my number, but I was super close with Cody, and he was reliable, so I would never have given my number to someone if he thought something was off with them. So I wake up in the next day on a Saturday, and everything's fine. Towards the afternoon, I receive a text message saying, "Hey, it's Zach. I got your number from Cody." So we had small talk, basically. I didn't want to be a jerk, so I respond mainly because he has friends with Cody, so I didn't want to be rude. After about 45 minutes of texting, he tells me he's leaving for a cruise and was really upset I wasn't coming with. So obviously I asked what he meant, and he said he would miss me and hated to be away from me for a week. I definitely thought it was extremely weird, but I figured it was sarcasm or a joke, so I texted back saying something like, "LOL, we have spoken for less than an hour. I think you'll be just fine." And he was like, "Yeah, I guess." From my perspective, I had a lot going on in my life. I was very anxious talking to people. I suffered from depression and daddy issues. I wasn't someone who could just be like, "You're weird, black number." I was very shy and just didn't know what to do in the situation. So I will admit, I let it go longer than I should have, but I was 14 and didn't realize who I was dealing with, to be honest. So, he's on the cruise, so I didn't hear from him for like a week. Then eventually he gets off the boat and tells me that I'm the first person he wanted to text. He even said he couldn't stop thinking about me and all the fun things we could have been doing while on the trip. The rest is pretty fuzzy, but all I remember is Zach kept saying weird shit like how we will get married in the future and how we are soulmates, and how he's never been so in love with anyone. He became obsessed with me for some fucking reason. If I didn't respond, he would text me every 5 goddamn minutes on the dot, asking if I was mad at him, until I responded. It was just very obsessive behavior. I would tell him I'm busy, and he'd get upset. He just needed me to text him constantly. One day, I basically told him that he was taking things way too far and that I was uncomfortable. I said I was sorry if I had somehow led him on, but I think of him more as a friend. He definitely didn't like that response. He was making fake Instagrams to harass me, telling me he's going to kill himself because I broke his heart, calling me a fucking whore. My first kiss was at 18, and my first boyfriend was at 19. So you do the math on whether I'm a whore or not, laughing my fucking ass off. He was just saying anything and everything to hurt me. I spent hours apologizing while he was telling me I'm a horrible person and should kill myself. It was just a fucked up conversation. I could not get Zach to leave me alone for months. After that, my friends had to sneak me out around campus to avoid Zach. I'd have to cut through buildings and take the long way to steer clear of him. Eventually, after a few months, he stopped harassing me online, and I actually thought I was free. Now, flash forward to sophomore year, after months of being in chemistry class, I noticed my friend, we'll call him Max, had the same last name as Zach. It's an uncommon last name, so it was like a little light bulb turned on in my brain, and I immediately asked if they were related. And he rolls his eyes and said, "Yeah." I was like, holy fuck. We ended up chatting, and apparently I'm not the only girl Zach would harass. Max told me he got sent to another school and was put into therapy for basically being crazy and aggressive. Zach, unfortunately, was extremely abusive toward Max. I was relieved he was sent away. Max was definitely more relieved he was sent away. It just made sense why the harassment stopped suddenly. Now, we are entering junior year. Max had informed me his brother was enrolled back in our high school. Thankfully, I had a heads up, but nothing would prepare me when I actually saw him face to face. I walked into my English class, and guess who's sitting in my goddamn classroom? If you have guessed Zach, you get a big-ass gold star. The second we made eye contact, he smiled the creepiest smile I'd ever fucking seen. I was so scared. I almost shit my spleen out. Thankfully, he never spoke to me or harassed me. However, he did spend every class staring at me with that scary grin on his face. As much as I wish I was making this shit up, unfortunately, these are true events that actually really affected me in high school. When my friend brought it up the other day, it honestly felt like a fever dream, like I just forgot it was all real. It was hard spending 2 whole years of high school terrified of bumping into him, not knowing what the fuck he would do, especially after finding out everything his brother Max went through. But now it's been years since I have had to deal with him, so Zach, let's never fucking meet again, dude. And I really hope you got the fucking help you need. This all happened when I was 19. I'm not the best looking dude, so I've never had much luck with women, and I ended up on Tinder. I wasn't having much luck there either until like the 3rd month of using it when a blonde woman named Katie messaged me. She was pretty enough that I just dismissed her as a bot. It wasn't until 3 days later that she messaged me again, which was odd because bots almost never message more than once. I clicked on her chat and replied, then looked at her profile. What I saw was pretty generic, but definitely wasn't a bot's profile. We had been talking for like a month when she proposed the idea that I come see her. I was pretty reluctant as she lived nearly 8 hours from me by car, but I had to admit I really did like her quite a bit, and I had been thinking about asking her if I could come see her for a while now. After a bit more badgering from her, I finally said that I would take the drive to see her. At this point, I had no reason to doubt, so she was who she said she was. We had video chatted every other week, and I called most days. I just assumed I got really lucky. Things did get a little weird on the way there, though. She kept messaging me, asking me where I was and making sure I was still coming. At some points, when I'd take more than 30 minutes to respond, She'd send me a slew of annoyed texts. Admittedly, I chalked it all up to her being nervous about me coming to see her. I was pretty nervous too, so I couldn't blame her. I had a hard time finding the house at first. The directions she gave me were pretty confusing, and it was all back through a series of gravel and dirt roads and a large thicket of trees. It was still about midway when I came onto an old-looking house. A window on the second floor was boarded up, but it didn't look abandoned. It just looked worn from the weather. Katie's red buggy that she liked to talk about was parked in front of the garage. I took out my phone and texted her that I was here. She only sent a smiley face in return. When I got out of my car to go knock on the door, I noticed that someone was looking at me from one of the second floor windows. I found it a little creepy, but I figured it was just her father or something. She had told me that he comes to stay with her every now and again, so I ignored it and knocked on her door. She answered with a smile and even gave me a kiss, which was a surprise, and I followed her inside. We sat down on her couch and started talking about our plans. When I asked her about her dad, "You didn't tell me that your dad was here," I said. "Was that going to be a surprise, or—" Katie looked confused and told me that her dad wasn't in here. I still thought she was keeping up the act, and I told her that she didn't have to keep pretending, and that I had seen him looking at me through the upstairs window. Katie went pale and said that we had to get out of there now. We ran out to our cars, and when I questioned Katie, she informed me that her dad wasn't there and that she had been home alone until I showed up. I called the police, and while we was on the phone giving the address, Katie gasped and pointed at the window where I seen the guy last. He was looking at us from the window again. I got a better look of him, and he seemed older and frail, almost like he hadn't eaten anything in a while. He left the window after he saw that we saw him. The police took half an hour to show up, and the whole time Katie was crying and mumbling about how she was an idiot for not keeping her doors locked. When the police finally did show up, one started asking me and Katie questions, and the other two searched the house. They came back out a little later and told me and Katie that while they didn't find anyone, they did find that the back door was hanging open. Whoever it was had ran out into the woods, but the cops were sure the house was empty. After the cops left, Katie asked me to stay the night because she was too scared to be in the house alone right now. I gladly did, and we slept downstairs on the couch, as Katie's bed was the room next to the one the man was in. Katie had also brought out the shotgun that her father had given her, but she never used. I told her it was fine and that the man was gone, but she insisted, saying she'd feel safer if we had it out. I'm glad she did. Later that night, I was still wide awake watching TV. Katie had somehow managed to fall asleep. From the kitchen, I heard the sound of a doorknob being turned. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was just pissed off. I flipped on the light in the kitchen and pointed the gun at the kitchen door, and there he was. The guy that had been in the house before was standing on the other side of the glass door. He looked shocked, and I'm glad we had locked the door. The man unfroze and yet again ran into the woods. I woke up Katie and told her what had happened and called the police yet again. When they arrived, they did a sweep of the woods and found no one yet again. They told Katie and me that it'd probably be a good idea to stay somewhere else for the night. Me and Katie said our goodbyes. She was going to stay at a friend's house, and I was going home. I left a little later after Katie did. I was on the phone with my brother telling him about what had happened. My headlights were on. As I was talking, something caught my eye. That fucking man was standing at the corner of the house, just watching me. I gunned it out of there and didn't even bother calling the police again. But I did text Katie, and she said she was going to call them again. I don't think Katie ever even went back to that house alone. If you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.